This summer, the river behind our village wore a glassy blue light. I learned to swim from a rope swing that hung from an old alder by the water's edge. The air was thick with heat and the scent of sun-warmed clay, of pine needles crushed beneath bare feet, of cornmeal from Aunt Mae's kitchen, where the windows kept catching the afternoon like a held breath. Aunt Mae stood on the porch with her apron tied tight, brushing flour from her sleeves, as if dusting away years. And the kettle sang softly on the stove, as though it too remembered the warmth of the day. Children's laughter floated from the far bend, where the boys dared each other to holler at the birds, and where the river wore the colour of ambition and mischief in the same measure. The rope swung in a patient arc, creaking a little, as it learned my weight. I watched the water approach with a calm that felt like the first slow breath, taken after waking from a dream you cannot quite remember. My father stood on the shore, the sun catching his hair in a halo that felt almost holy, telling me in a voice that sounded like gravel smoothing, "Go on," and then softer, "Trust it." He didn't coax me with grand promises, just with the steady rhythm of his words, a rhythm that sounded like the ticking of a clock in a quiet room, the kind you don't question, you simply listen to until your pulse falls into it. That summer is when fear first learned to share the room with something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or stubborn hope. I remember the first moment of release. I let go of the rope and felt the air lift me up, a quick, bright ache in my chest, the river greeting me with a cool kiss that smelled faintly of riverweed and rain. The surface broke into 1,000 tiny silver coins as I splashed and then found a rhythm underneath it, the water wrapping around my arms in a way that felt both unfamiliar and necessary, like a language I'd always known but never spoken aloud. I swallowed a mouthful of water and coughed it back out, and for a second the world narrowed to the line of the bank, the circle of Aunt Mae's white apron, the heat bouncing off the surface, my legs moving with a stubborn, determined sort of courage. When I surfaced, there was no triumph shouted from the bushes, only the gentle rock of the rope's sway and the distant laughter that drifted across the water like a soft, forgiving rain. I paddled to the shore and stood there, water beading on my shoulders, listening to the ring of pebbles beneath my feet, tasting the taste of river on my lips, an oddly sweet staleness, the exact flavour of having done something you didn't know you could do until you did it. My father's smile was small but bright, and he offered his hand as if he expected me to keep walking between two worlds now, one of old fears left on the riverbank, and one of a new capacity I would need in days to come. That afternoon poured itself into the days that followed, like a well-loved story, being read aloud with a deep, patient voice. We swam in the leisurely heat, then lay on the grass to dry, the blades tickling our wrists as if the meadow itself wished to listen to our gossip. The world grew larger with every stroke, every ache in the shoulder that warned me to slow down, and still I learned to listen to the river's patient counsel. Go, then rest, then go again. The bank smelled of sun-warmed soil and sweet clover. The sky was that startling, honest blue that seems to lay bare a person's flaws and their stubborn faith at once. In the hush between intervals of laughter, I learned the quiet sound of a heart learning to trust its own breath. Evening settled as a soft blanket over the village. The kitchen glow snuck out the windows and pooled on the grass like spilled gold. Aunt Mae's voice carried through the air, layered with stories of summers long before mine, of boats that once drifted on a different river, of fathers and mothers who spoke to their children in the same tender cadence that now steadied me. We ate corn on the cob still steaming, dripping butter and salt onto our knuckles. shared dulcet slices of peach, and listened to the cicadas drum their solemn, patient music into the late light. I can still hear the clink of glass, the clatter of a spoon against a china plate, and the way the air tasted after the rain, a discipline of smell that made the memory feel as if it happened not long ago, though many years have wrinkled the corners of it like soft paper. In those days, the river did not just teach a boy to swim, it taught him to listen to the world's small, stubborn truths. I learned to measure my steps, not against fear, but against patience. The patience of a child learning to glide rather than sprint. The patience of a river that refuses to hurry, only to arrive when it is ready. I learned to watch the light along the bank, to notice how the water seemed to rearrange itself for a moment at the point where a fish flashed by, and to understand that awe is a currency one spends in small installments. The moment that memory spans, standing on the sun-warmed bank, eyes bright, lungs suddenly full of air, shaped me more than any single lecture or commandment ever could. It taught me that courage can be quiet, that resolve can be soft, that the world rewards persistence more with its presence than with its praise. Time has done its quiet work since then. The village grew a little older, the river a touch more impassive to our noise. Aunt Mae's house still stands, but the kitchen's warmth is not quite the same. The stove a touch whiter with age, the windows a bit thinner at the corners where the wind always finds a way in. My father's voice is a tune I can still hear when I close my eyes, a mixture of strength and gentleness that steadied me on days I felt I would be blown over by the wind itself. The rope swing has become a pair of old, sun-bleached ropes in a land where new ropes have taken their place, and the river is taller, more knowing than it used to be, as rivers will be. Yet there are gifts time cannot erase. The memory of that first dive remains a quiet lighthouse in my chest, a soft, reliable beacon that guides the way I move through. It is also the memory of a community holding me up, the sound of laughter filling the long afternoons, the sense that I was seen and part of something larger than fear, larger even than my own small bravities, and most tenderly, it is the memory of a room that smelled like corn and rain-soaked wood, and the feeling of being known by people who would always welcome me back, no matter how much the river or time or loss might change me. Now, when I walk along a country road late in the evening, the sensation of the river comes back to me in 100 small, ordinary ways. The way the wind carries the scent of pine and earth, the soft glow of porch lights, the careful braking of tires on gravel like a whispered apology to the day. If I hear a child stumble into fear or uncertainty, I am reminded of the first moment I learned to let courage be a companion rather than a tyrant. If a kitchen grows warm with the memory of shared meals, I am reminded of Aunt Mae's flour-dusted hands, the patient hum of her voice, the way a story could settle the day before it began. And if I walk into a quiet room and find the river's old patience within me, I realize how much of the person I became was built not on starlit epiphanies, but on the slow, faithful work of showing up on the days when the water was cold and the rope was rough and fear was a familiar old friend who stayed only long enough to be proved a liar. Time, in its steady, unrelenting way, continues to move me forward. Yet the memory of that summer remains a small, bright harbour in my chest, a place where I learned to breathe in the world's wide, generous air and to breathe out fear. It reminds me that to be alive is not to dodge every stumble, but to rise with a little more grace after each one. It teaches me to treasure the ordinary, the kitchen's warm glow, the river's patient approach, the soft sigh of the evening breeze, as deeply as I treasure the moments when fear yielded to trust, and I found, for a moment, that I belonged to something larger than myself. And so I am grateful. Grateful for the heat that made a river feel like a doorway to tomorrow, for the laughter that braided through the air until it stitched itself into my bones, for the hands that steadied me and the hands that released me to learn. Time may pass and the river may change its tone from bright to murky and back again, but meaning endures, steadfast as a lighthouse in a fog. The memory is not only a record of what happened, it is a compass for who I have become, and a quiet assurance of what I still might become if I am brave enough to listen to its old, patient voice.